Welcome to Books vs. Movies, the podcast where I set out to answer the age-old question, is the book really always better than the movie? I'm Yuvia, an actress and book lover based out of New York City, and today I will be discussing The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot and its 2017 adaptation, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, starring Byrne and Oprah Winfrey. So right off the bat, I apologize if I'm not my usual chipper self. Right before I started recording this episode, I received some very sad news that one of my former coworkers, who was also a faculty member at my former place of work, passed away. And I'm not sure if I can say his name just yet, just because we were notified. One of my friends that still works there was notified. I guess everyone that currently works there was notified today, and so he notified us because we're currently preparing Lysistrata, which is going to be part of this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. And my coworker I'll just say his name, Jim, was the one that started this in his class. So a lot of the cast are some of his former students, and he's the one that kind of brought this project to life, and it kind of just grew and expanded into what it is now. He did end up stepping down from directing and everything, and my friend Moshi took over, and we had a production of it last year, and then so this year it's going to Edinburgh, and I don't know that this production would have even been possible without him, because he's the one that brought it to life. So yeah, I was saying I wasn't sure if I could say his name. I guess his first name is fine, but yeah, regardless of how I felt about my former place of work, he was one of the people that I really admired and respected and enjoyed having him as a kind of pseudo coworker. He was, I guess technically he was, but he was a teacher there more than anything. And I'm really gonna miss you, Jim. Yeah, sorry everyone. I needed to have a moment. It's one of those things that, like, I received the news and Moshi told us in our cast group chat, and I wrote a little something for Jim in his honor, and I told Orlando, because Orlando knows. He's heard so many stories about Jim. There's always so many stories in the office that involve Jim, because he was a great person. So yeah, it wasn't until right this moment when he started speaking about him that the tears started coming out. I'm honored to have worked with him for 5 years. When we reopened, because when I got hired at my former workplace, we were online because I got hired during COVID, and Jim and I were one of 6 people who came back to the office. And so he's one of the people I met first in person. So many of my coworkers I met online and knew them online for several months, but Jim was one of the first people I met in person. And it was a little lonely in the office at that time, and I would always see him when it was lunchtime or when he had to use the printer or the copier or whatever. His office was on a different floor than mine, but the break room and copier and all that was on my floor. So I have so many great stories about Jim. This podcast is obviously not about him, but I just wanted to share a little bit of Jim with all of you for starting this episode. So let's go ahead and get started. To make things a lot easier for this episode, I'm going to read. I usually try to summarize the blurbs of the books, but in this case I think it'll just be so much easier if I read the actual blurb. I have edited it a little bit, but I'm gonna be reading the majority of it. So The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot was first published in 2010. This book is about Henrietta Lacks, but scientists know her as HeLa. She was a poor southern tobacco farmer who worked the same land as her enslaved ancestors, yet her cells, which are taken without her knowledge by the way, became one of the most important tools in medicine. The first quote-unquote immortal human cells grown in culture. They're still alive today, though she had has been dead for more than 70 years. If you could pile all HeLa cells ever grown onto a scale, they'd weigh more than 50 million metric tons, as much as 100 Empire State Buildings. HeLa cells were vital for developing the polio vaccine, uncovered secrets of cancer, viruses, and the atom bomb's effects, helped lead to important advances like in vitro fertilization, cloning, and gene mapping, and have been bought and sold by the billions. Yet Henrietta Lacks remains virtually unknown, buried in an unmarked grave. Rebecca Skloot books takes us on a journey from the colored ward of Johns Hopkins Hospital in the 1950s to stark white laboratories with freezers full of HeLa cells, from Henrietta's small, dying hometown of Clover, Virginia, to East Baltimore of the 2000s, where her children and grandchildren live and struggle with the legacy of her cells. Henrietta's family did not learn of her quote-unquote immortality until more than 20 years after her death, when scientists investigating HeLa began using her husband and children in research without informed consent. And though the cells had launched a multi-million-dollar industry that sells human biological materials, her family never saw any of the profits. The story of the Lacks family is inextricably connected to the history of experimentation on African Americans, the birth of bioethics, and the legal battles over whether we control the stuff we are made of. Over the decade it took to uncover the story, Rebecca became enmeshed in the lives of the Lacks family, especially Henrietta's daughter Deborah, who was devastated to learn about her mother's cells. She was consumed with questions. Had scientists cloned her mother? Did it hurt her when researchers infected her cells with viruses and shot them into space? What happened to her sister Elsie, who died in a mental institution at the age of 15? And if her mother was so important to medicine, why couldn't her children afford health insurance? The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks captures the beauty and drama of scientific discovery as well as its human consequences. The 2017 adaptation, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, stars Rose Byrne and Oprah Winfrey, and it follows an African-American woman who becomes an unwitting pioneer for medical breakthroughs when her cells are used to create the first immortal human cell line in the early 1950s. Watching this film, I'd never heard of it. I'd seen the picture of Henrietta Lacks, and I've seen the picture more so on the cover of the book of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. So I had never heard of her beyond this picture, this book cover. And so I was excited to learn more about her. And I watched the film before I read the book, and I was kind of let down by the film just because it's called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, but the film focuses pretty much exclusively on Rebecca and Deborah. The relationship between Rebecca and Deborah is important in terms of the book. Rebecca Skloot jumps back and forth in between Henrietta's early years to jumping forward in the future to an advancement in science that was made thanks to her cells, jumping back to giving the backstory of her children's lives mainly, to again jumping to another medical advancement, to her time researching Henrietta and getting to know Henrietta Lacks' family and trying to learn more about her even though the family is very, very hesitant and unwilling to talk to her. So she continues trying to get this information out of them until eventually she does. So the latter half of the book, I would say, stops focusing on Henrietta so much and focuses more on her research journey and her journey mainly with Deborah and trying to win Deborah over and taking Deborah with her on research trips so that Deborah learns more about her mother. Henrietta passed away when Deborah was 2. So 2 or 4, I don't remember off the top of my head right now. I apologize for that. I want to say 2 years old. Henrietta died when Deborah was so young that Deborah has absolutely no memory of Henrietta, and all she's ever had growing up was a few pictures and just stories that she heard from family members. So, and even then, she really didn't have much more information than, she had information on who her mother was as a person, not much beyond that. So to have the film be called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks and have little to no information on Henrietta was a little frustrating, because it's like, this is called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and I don't know much about Henrietta. And mind you, the immortal life part of Henrietta are her cells. That's what it's referring to. But even in the film, we didn't get much information about HeLa cells. So we do get a lot more information in the book about who Henrietta was as a person. It's still not a complete picture, and I think it's just having to do with the family revealing things to Rebecca about Henrietta, but not revealing everything, which is they're completely and their right as her family to do. And a lot of them were also they're very hesitant to trust her, understandably. So there isn't a lot of information, but we do get more than we do in the film, and we get a lot more information about HeLa in the book than we do in the film. So at least I did learn something about Henrietta and about HeLa. And the film, it was really just focused on Rebecca getting to know Deborah, and it was very well acted, but I didn't learn anything about Henrietta. And I feel like the film tried to make Henrietta seem as like this much bigger driving force than she actually was. And I mean exclusively in the film. Like, the film tries to paint Henrietta, I'm going to call it the character of Henrietta in the film is used, like, the filmmakers are trying to convince us that she's more of a driving force in the film than she actually is. Like, this is not her story. This is Rebecca and Deborah's story pretty much exclusively. So that was a little frustrating. In terms of the book, as I said, I did learn more about Henrietta and the HeLa cells in the book. I did learn more about them than I ever did watching the film. But even then, I still learned more about her family than I did about her. And again, it's just one of those things that, as I mentioned, even in the blurb, it's like it took 10 decades of research to pull this book together. And it's still like, but I'm still learning more about her family than I am about the woman and the cells that supposedly inspired Rebecca to want to write this book. So there was some issues there, so I did like the book, but it was just okay for me in that sense, because it was like, well, I still don't really know much more about her. And this story was set out to tell us more about this woman who, at least we know her name now, and we know more about her than we did before. And this isn't necessarily thanks to Rebecca. Henrietta, HeLa, in order to not reveal her name, the doctors that initially took her cells called her Helen Lane they gave her that pseudonym for a while, and then they finally revealed that it was Henrietta Lacks' cells. But even then, I don't know. I wish this story focused more on Henrietta. And okay, the family doesn't want to reveal too much about her. That's okay. They have every right to protect her as much as they want. But I still feel like we could have learned more about the cells and what they did. It was like the book also just felt very, like the second half of the book felt much more focused on Rebecca and Deborah again, and Deborah learning things about her mother that were incredibly distressing to her, about her mother and her sister. She did end up finding out what happened to her sister, and they were incredibly debilitating to find out, and it affected her health, her mental and physical health, after learning such distressing news. And it felt almost a little wrong to be reading about that. I don't know, just because it's like, this is like you're witnessing someone going through this emotional turmoil that's literally affecting their mental and physical well-being, and we're learning it like we were there physically. I don't know, it felt a little wrong to me. But anyway, so I don't really this can be a very short episode. There really isn't, in terms of like the differences. The biggest difference between the book and the film is just how much the film is not about Henrietta. We get like little bits and pieces about Henrietta's life and a little blurbs about her cells and what her cells did for the world. And that's all well and good, but we learn more about Rebecca and her relationship with Deborah than anything. And there are like some minor things that were like, I don't think there was anything that was like, there were some things added, but I don't feel like it was as over dramatized as other based on true story films we've brought here. I think if it happens in the book, it happened in the film. Some minor changes did occur just to, like, if in the book, Rebecca would be like, I knew this about myself, but obviously we need to show the audience certain things, so they were shown in the film. So she reiterates a lot, like, I was completely broke doing this and I knew this and I had no way of like, and I had to like reiterate to Deborah over and over. But in the film, like there's actually a scene where Deborah confronts her and Rebecca shows her like her physical bank statements and stuff saying like, see, I'm broke. So I'm not making any money off of your mom. So that being said, I do want to, it's interesting because looking at like the people I follow, like some of my friends, it's kind of like hit or miss. Like 2 of my friends gave it either 4 or 5 stars. One of my friends gave it 3 stars, which is what I gave it. And then book club friends gave it 2 stars. So I want to start off with book club friend Terry's review. She gave it 2 stars. She said, I was disappointed in this book. The family perspective was interesting, but I had trouble connecting with them through the author's eyes. And I will agree with that. I feel like I connected with the family a lot more in the film than I connected with them in the book. And I don't know if there was just some biases there. I mean, I'm sure there was that kind of prevented the family to come off as, I don't know how to describe it. There was like once Rebecca got to know the family, I think the portrayal softened a little bit, but before she met them or when she's talking to, I don't know, it was just, I think just the way it was written, it was just hard to connect with the characters. Whereas in the film, it's directed by a Black man, and I mean, you have a big name like Oprah Winfrey playing Deborah, and I don't know, like to have it be directed by a Black man, I think helped because he's Black. And I mean, the difficult moments that Rebecca experienced with his family, they were, I mean, having it, I feel like, I don't think I'm explaining myself very well, or people are, I think I'm explaining myself really badly, but I hope you know that I'm trying to say that it helps to have a Black man directing this film, because the moments in which Rebecca describes as difficult, or the difficult moments she had with Henrietta's family, as a Black man, he might be able to know why those moments were difficult, why the family came across to her as a certain way, and he's able to, I don't want to say humanize, because just the portrayal, like the way he approaches the portrayal is going to be from a, I understand why you're doing that or why you acted this way in this moment kind of angle, as opposed to her bias of like, I was potentially scared, I mean, she admits she was like nervous and scared and not trusting at first, and straight up scared of some of the family members. So, you know, that kind of goes away in the film. So you're able to connect with the family a lot more, and you're able to see a lot more of the joy and the love that there is in that family. That I feel was like, I think Rebecca tried to talk about it, but it didn't come off as authentic, or it didn't translate well, I should say. Then book club friend Emily also gave it 2 stars, and she brings up some very good points. I'm not going to read the whole review, it is kind of long, but I want to bring up some of the points that Emily brings up in her review, which is some of the things I feel like bothered me. So this is Emily's, I'm going to be skipping around, but this is all going to be of Emily's review. So, quote, this book has already been lauded and reviewed to the moon and to the garbage can, which is where I think it should go. The story, as Skloot tells it, has already been told in articles and briefly in another book, but Skloot feels called to tell it again. Unfortunately, this is the very public story of a private individual and her family who have never consented to any of this and are tired of white people turning up on their doorstep looking for inside information. Skloot acknowledges this without stopping and finding a new hobby. And here's a far from complete list of problems with this book. My other problems are tied racism, mostly Skloot's. She drives through a Black Baltimore neighborhood for over an hour looking for a store without stopping to ask Black people for directions. emotions is scary. She keeps waving at the same men. Children are running after her car, and she seeks a church for sanctuary. Skloot's treatment of Deborah in general. Skloot seems genuinely impressed by Deborah's research on HeLa cells, but she never goes so far as to help her or connect her with the lawyer to look into the legitimacy of his suit against, say, Johns Hopkins for releasing Mrs. Lacks' medical records without consent. Skloot refuses to give a percentage of book sales to Mrs. Lacks' descendants directly, instead creating a scholarship fund of which she is the gatekeeper. And the last day Skloot and Deborah travel together, Skloot describes Deborah's crazy manic behavior as though it was consistent with Deborah's normal self, even though Skloot learns the next day that Deborah was having a major medical episode that caused her to act erratic. End quote. So there is a lot more to Emily's review. Those are the points that I wanted to focus on. And yeah, just watching that part of the film, like I said, it's very well acted. Oprah Winfrey did a good job. And even reading about that moment did feel a little exploitative of Deborah. And again, the family not wanting to speak to people about Henrietta or HeLa anymore, and Rebecca kind of insisting until she wears them down does feel very inappropriate, or it does feel inappropriate. But one thing I do want to press upon is Emily's point that Emily makes about Skloot refusing to give a percentage of book sales to Mrs. Lacks' descendants directly. In the book, she does, like Deborah says, oh, you should give me a part of the book sales. And Skloot says, oh, I can't give you a part of the book sales. And it's like, why not? And she says that it's kind of hinted at, like conflict of interest or whatever, but it's like, but if you, and it doesn't go into much detail other than that hint of like conflict of interest. It's not clearly explained why Rebecca can't give part of her book sales to the Lacks family. It's like you're still making money off of them and their story. And one of the things that the family talks about constantly is their scientists who took her cells without her consent, without her knowledge, are making millions are making lots of money off of her, and we're not making a dime. And she talks about this and how they always bring this point up, and yet there's like a hypocrisy on her end, because it's like, I'm also refusing to give you a portion off of your story. Maybe there are rules and laws about this, but it's like, don't just say I can't do that, but here's what I'll do instead. And it's like, I'm going to create this fund, and if you are a direct descendant of Henrietta Lacks or anyone else who is the descendant of someone who was experimented on without their consent, you can apply for money here, and it can be for anything. And I mean, at least it's something, granted, but I don't know, it does feel a little wrong and a little hypocritical to talk about like her family being upset that their financial circumstances haven't changed, even though the financial circumstances of the people that have done stuff with Henrietta's cells have. And yeah, so it does feel very wrong to me. And I was looking into the foundation, and one of the board of directors listed here is no longer alive. He actually passed away in 2023. So, and you can still donate to the foundation to this day. So to me, it's like, one of your board of directors passed away. He's still listed on there as a board of director, not like in memoriam or anything like that. He's still listed on there when he passed away 3 years ago. So it's like, if you're not, I don't know. To me, it's just like, it feels weird that I can still make a donation to the foundation, but the website hasn't been updated in 3 years. So it's like, can people still apply? Are people still getting this money? Like, if you can't even update your website so it's up to date with your board of directors, is everyone else still a board of director? Yeah, when I found that, it feels wrong. It feels very wrong. And like I said, at least it's something, but it's also like just so, I don't know. It just feels wrong. So I do agree with Emily's point there. I also feel like there was, I don't know, I'm glad there is a story of Henrietta out there and that we're learning more about her. Or a lot of the things that happened without her consent. And things are briefly brought up, like the Tuskegee syphilis experiments that were done on Black men without their consent. And I don't know, it's like, yes, so many medical advances were made thanks to Henrietta's cells. And it feels icky to say thanks to the Tuskegee experiment. But it's also like, at the end of the day, these people were used as lab rats, as science experiments, not to mention the Dr. Marion Sims, who's called the father of modern gynecology, who discovered a lot of gynecological treatments and issues by performing these treatments or doing these operations on enslaved women without any anesthesia. And he's the name that we know. So yeah, it brings up a lot of, like, it tries to focus on yeah, it's unfortunate that this happened to Henrietta and her family, but look at everything we did. And it's like, okay, but we're just gonna gloss over the fact that a lot of the things we've discovered were done without, most of the time, Black people's consent. That just feels so wrong. And it's still being done today. It's one of those things that a lot of doctors still defend. And that is, like, any time you go to the doctor or anything and a sample is taken from you willingly, even if it's willingly, like you're there to get something tested, they keep it. And it's like, who's to say that, like, a sample I've given isn't doing something for modern science right now? And I have no idea that this is happening. And it's one of those ethical things that, like, a lot of doctors and researchers still defend, because it's like, I don't know a lot of people that would willingly allow us to try some of these things on them, and it's in the name of modern science and modern treatment and advancement. I think it should continue happening. I don't know. It's like, I understand that, but anyway, and I guess, I don't know, it just felt wrong for Rebecca to kind of gloss over these experiments and the things that were done without the person's consent, because we learned great things from these experiments, and it's just problematic. But anyway, I rated the book 3 stars. I thought it was okay. I was hoping for more. At the end of the day, I was hoping to learn more about Henrietta and HeLa, which I did, but it still felt more of Rebecca's story. Because even though her family are major players in the story, it's ultimately Rebecca's story of getting to know Deborah and taking Deborah to learn about Henrietta and HeLa. And I don't know. And maybe there wouldn't be enough material to talk about just Henrietta because of how much her family was hesitant to reveal, and I will keep saying that is up to them, but I don't know. So I was just hoping for more, and I rated the movie 3 stars as well. I did not learn anything about the woman who's in the title, and it was well acted. I have to say, it was very well acted. Oprah Winfrey acted her butt off in this role. But did I learn anything about Henrietta other than these cells were taken without her consent? No. Did I learn anything about HeLa? Not really. No. So the winner is the book. I did have my issues with the book as well. And as you can see, at least amongst my friends, and my friends and people I follow, it's kind of hit or miss. It's either like really eye-opening and great and they learned a lot, or it's kind of like, it's okay. So yeah, I did learn more about Henrietta and HeLa. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks makes a lot more sense in the book, and at least I learned something about the woman I was supposed to be learning about. So that is why my winner is. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of Books versus Movies. I once again apologize for this episode, just in terms of I wasn't my happy usual self, and I feel like it just made it, I was having a harder time expressing what I was trying to say than I usually do. So, but I thank you for your grace, and I hope you still enjoyed this episode anyway. And I'm currently reading a lot of other books, so expect more episodes down the line, but this time I don't know what's going to be next headed your way. But thank you for listening. Please leave it a rating and a review. If you liked it, tell your friends all about it. And this is for you, Jim. Thanks for everything. Bye.